history. Can you see, little boy, what you mean to me? Can you see how sweet our love has long grown to be? It's time to see the happiness I feel inside of me. Knowing one thing, darling, this love will always be two lovers, history. Ain't that two lovers, history?
Welcome to episode 31 of the History Boys Abroad, a Celtic podcast. We are the invincible treble champions. Here we go and all that. My name is Tony, and today I'm joined by Liam and Gary to slice into a very dark period of Celtic's past to try and make sense, if we can, of an event that still ripples to this day. We usually do this podcast about positive things or stories that are cool to learn about, or even to try and flesh out stuff in the past that people have forgotten. But today it's going to be a wee bit creepy and a wee bit dark, so we apologise in advance. Today is a topic that people struggle to talk about even now. What are we going to talk about today, Gary?
We're going to talk about our friend Mo
Judas Johnston. We're going to try and understand the saga. We want to talk about what happened before he joined Celtic, his career when he started at Partick Thistle to signing for Celtic, the 3 seasons he played at Celtic, and then the inevitable debacle when he supposedly re-signed for Celtic. So I'm joined by Gary and Liam. How are you doing, boys?
I'm well.
Yeah,
Gary?
Not too bad.
Okay. Gary, why did we decide to do this?
Because I think things have just been going far too well in the Celtic world, and we have to go back and torture ourselves a wee bit. No, I think that we usually, when we tend to do podcasts about, and they always tend to have a kind of happy ending, or you talk about players that have had a very positive impact on Celtic, and I think it's important to focus on these type of things as well, because in terms of the history and so on, Judas Johnston would probably be up there, probably in the top 10 players if you're talking about the impact that his career had on the kind of psyche of the support or the kind of history of Celtic, especially the recent history, not just of Celtic I'd say, but of Rangers, of Scottish football in general. It's hard to think of a more, apart from the Huns dying, hard to think of a more how would you say it, more seismic event that's happened in the kind of Scottish football landscape apart from that.
It was the ultimate trolling, which we're going to, unfortunately, going to have to talk about it. But to be honest, when he first played for Celtic, he was actually quite a good player, and I'm going to start by talking about his career before Celtic and then him signing for Celtic. So he basically started out, I think he's from Springburn. Turns out Fred, who's one of the other boys that we do this with, was a friend of his growing up, so they kind of know each other, which he kept quiet until about half an hour ago. But anyway, so he played for Partick Thistle. He signed for Partick Thistle in about 1981, and I'm pretty sure Partick Thistle were just yo-yoing between the First Division and the Scottish League. I'm not entirely sure they were that great, but he managed to score quite a lot of goals. I think he maybe scored something like 40 goals in 2 seasons, which is quite a decent record for somebody that's 18 years old playing in the second or the First Division, if you want to call it, of Scottish football. Kind of, when I was reading this and looking at his record, and it's not possible to find the goals he scored for Partick Thistle, but I kind of got the impression it's a very, very lazy comparison, but sort of Jason Cummings style record in the First Division, quite a young Scottish guy, shite hair. That will be pressing explicit on this podcast, I've just swore. So, but yeah, I kind of got the impression it was similar to the sort of record that Jason Cummings has in the Scottish First Division currently, or League One, whatever it's called these days. But by all accounts, he was a massive Celtic fan growing up. Apparently he was a regular jumping the turnstiles in the 70s, and he grew up in the Springburn, Maryhill area, and he was just Celtic daft. As Fred said earlier on, you could always find him with a ball at his feet, and he was just an exceptional player from a very, very young age. The thing that kind of struck me is quite surprising was that he got a move to the English, what is now the English Premiership, off the back of scoring all those goals for Partick Thistle. As I say, he scored maybe over 40 goals in just over 2 seasons, just there or thereabouts, because the transfer window was very flexible back then, of course. But he got a 200 grand move to Watford, which is quite a lot of money. He was born in 1964, and when he made the move down to Watford, I think he must have only been 18 or 19. So to go down for 200 grand at that age, he must have shown that he was good. He just must have had something, and it turns out he was actually quite good. So he goes down there, and he plays for Watford. Do you have any idea the manager in charge of Watford at the time, Gary? Any idea who it was?
Would it be Graham Taylor?
It was Graham Taylor, very good. Liam, I've got a question for you. Who was he playing alongside? Which Celtic great did he play alongside at Watford?
Oh, I don't know. I noted that Graham Taylor was the manager, but I don't know who he played alongside.
Gary. Celtic great.
Celtic great. Oliver Tebley? Nah, no idea.
Oh. John Barnes.
Ah.
Same side as John Barnes. In his first season and his only season at Watford, he helped them to a mid-table finish. He was their top goal scorer with about 24 goals. Excuse me. 24 goals under the age of 20 in the top division in England, and he helped them get to the FA Cup final. Did you know that?
Nope.
He
I
got
do
a
now.
goal chopped off. Yes, well, that's the whole point of it, my man. He managed to score a goal in the FA Cup final, get chopped off, and they lost to Everton. And Everton had players like Peter Reid, and I can't remember the name of the manager. Dom Sullivan maybe was playing for them, something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, he managed to get to an FA Cup final, which is quite a big deal when you think about it. A Scottish guy, especially way back then, playing for a team like Watford in the FA Cup final, it was considered to be quite a big deal. And when he went down to Partick, when he left Partick Thistle and went to Watford, there was no real indication that Celtic were after him. Celtic had Charlie Nicholas, who we'll talk about a little bit, and we also had players like Brian McClare on the scene. So it wasn't seen as a priority to try and sign players like Johnston, as it were. However, he goes to Watford, scores a lot of goals, and then sort of makes some sounds about wanting to come back to Glasgow. And apparently he said he would walk over broken glass to play for Celtic, to play for the Hoops. Apparently he said that. The same day that he lost in the FA Cup final, Celtic lost to Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup final the exact same day. And he was apparently told the result while he was sitting in the dressing room of Wembley, and he was just devastated. As I say, by all accounts, the guy was a die-hard Tim, which, when you think about it, when you see his little stupid face these days, you're just thinking, you are just anything but one of us. So he's making sounds about coming back to Glasgow. Celtic have sold Charlie Nicholas in May 1983. Charlie was absolutely prolific. Do you know how many goals Charlie Nicholas scored? And I think it was 1981, Gary.
Was it 50? Because I think, from what I remember, Larson
it was actually
broke that record.
Yeah, 1982-83. Liam, how many?
Was it 53?
48.
48.
I think Nicholas is probably about 21 years old when he does that. 21 years old. He's 21, sounds better when you say it like that. He was 21 when he scored those goals. So Mo Johnston is down at Watford scoring goals. He plays one season with Watford, 200 grand, and then Celtic start to take an interest in him, and he sort of starts flirting with Celtic in the press. Celtic sign him. Do you know how much Celtic paid for him?
Yes, 400 grand, which was a Scottish transfer record at that point.
Exactly. It's a lot of money to pay for a player, considering Celtic were actually quite tight with the cash. We sold Charlie Nicholas a season and a half before. We sold Charlie Nicholas to Arsenal for like 650 grand, I think, and obviously they felt that they never really replaced him. Although we signed Brian McClare for about 75 grand. Now Brian McClare is someone that we all have spoke about privately as someone who we would like to do a podcast on, because his record at Celtic was just kind of goes under the radar. But he was, the season that we're about to talk about, the one that I'm talking about, the 84-85 season, McClare was just incredible, absolutely incredible. I think he scored 4 goals in 2 games, twice. If that makes sense. He scored a hat-trick and a goal in 2 separate games, so 8 goals in 2 games is incredible. And Celtic had players like McGarvey, McCluskey, Nicholas. McLeod scored a lot of goals, and as I said, McClare, lots of mix in there. So just to give you an idea of why Celtic were looking to bring in another striker, I kind of have some figures here. In the 1980-81 season, McGarvey scored 29, McCluskey scored 13, and Nicholas scored 28. Celtic won the league that season. In 1981-1982, McCluskey scored 25, McLeod scored 16, McGarvey scored 15. Celtic won the league that season. 1982-83, Nicholas 48, McGarvey 24, McLeod 19, McCluskey 11. Firing in all cylinders, goals from all over the place. Celtic came second in 82-83 though, 1 point off of Dundee United, who Dundee United Aberdeen and Celtic were the three strongest teams in this area we're going to talk about. And Celtic came second again, 7 points behind Aberdeen in 83-84. McClare with 31, McGarvey with 17 and McLeod 14 and McCluskey 11. So George McCluskey's still there or thereabouts. So he signs for Celtic in October, up until the point of Celtic signing him. In the first 5 games of the season of 84-85, Celtic draw 4 games. Celtic draw the first 3 games of the season. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's Davy Hayes, the manager, by the way, who's in charge. So Celtic are obviously one of the best teams in the country. We want to win the league. The first 3 games of the season you draw, and I think 2 of them were 0-0s. What does it mean? Like, is that absolutely horrific, or is it just me?
I think that you're talking about, at the time, a much stronger league, and now if we had that kind of record, you'd be like, what's going on? But teams could constantly take points off Celtic without, and it was just a kind of par for the course, because our rivals are dropping points as well. I think there's a stronger level of league, to be honest with you.
I would agree with that. So it was a 10-team league, and the season I'm going to talk about here, I've actually got the paper in front of me. Let's have a look here. So the league that we had was a 10-team league. It had Aberdeen, Celtic, Dundee United, Rangers, St Mirren, Dundee, Hearts, Hibs, Dumbarton and Morton. Obviously, Dumbarton, Morton, Hibs and Rangers, one of them's died and the other ones are pure garbage, but the rest of them's quite a solid Scottish league. But yeah, so Celtic are up against it. Aberdeen have Alex Ferguson. Dundee United have got a very decent side as well. They give us a bit of a game. We actually played them in the Scottish Cup final that season, which we'll talk about. This is the season where Celtic get this first sponsor on the stomach of the jersey. What was the first sponsor, Liam?
That would have been a joint venture with the old Rangers when it was C.R. Smith.
Yeah, I think the most galling thing about that was the fact that it was like we had to do it in tandem with the Monkeys. A lot of people were really, really upset about that, but I read that the money that we actually accrued from giving the space to C.R. Smith on the jersey helped us pay for Judas. So, and he scored quite a lot of goals for us, so I don't know which way you want to look at that, but anyway. So yeah, and as I say, we got quite a lot of money for Charlie Nicholas, and not much of it was reinvested. We did make an amazing signing in Brian McClare, though. I think it was 75 grand from, I think it was Motherwell he came from, and he ends up going back to Motherwell and finishing his career. But yeah, he turned out to be an amazing signing and much cheaper and probably more effective than Judas. So it's Davy Hayes' second season as manager. Obviously he took over after Billy McNeill, and he's sort of in between the Billy McNeill eras at Celtic as a manager. Yeah, this is the season of Rapid Vienna. I just want to say as well, we have done podcasts in the past that are kind of now all merging into one. So 2 ones I want to mention. The C.R. Smith thing, we're talking about strips and jerseys and crests and kits. We done a podcast on that. It's episode 13. It's free to download. Google it, you'll find it. It exists, it's free. And we also, this is the season of Rapid Vienna, which I'm not really wanting to talk about too much because it's infuriating. So we've done a full episode on the Rapid Vienna ties, all 3 of them. And that is episode 9. Again, that's for free. Just need to Google it. It's on Hail Media and other places like that. So, yeah, on paper, signing Judas. I should point out, any time that somebody does make that noise, we're going to have to go. So, anytime someone does say his name, we're going to do that. Does that sound?
Fine by me.
That's fine to me.
New technology for the podcast. Anyway, so yeah, 84-85 season, his first game for Celtic. He signs in about October 1984. His first game is a 3-0 victory at Celtic Park against Hibernian. Pat Bonner, Danny McGrain, Murdo McLeod, Roy Aitken, Tom McAdam, I think, Peter Grant, Davy Provan, someone that I noticed was a massive player for Celtic through this time. Paul McStay, Judas, Tommy Burns, McGarvey and McClare as well, and Colquhoun. What do you think of that side, Gary? What do you think of that?
This is the Davy Hay side of the 84-85. Yeah, it's I think we covered it on the very extensive Roy Aitken podcast that we had. It seems like it's a side that had a lot of attacking flair. If you look at those names, and you could see from the amount of goals that we scored and so on. It was a team that could score in any kind of situation. The problem is it just perhaps lacked that wee bit of steel. This is basically Celtic throughout the 80s. I think just need a wee bit more defensive assurance to be a top side. But I think in terms of attacking wise, I think they could give any team problems.
I think one of the things that McGarvey commented on was that Celtic had goals all over the pitch, and he's right. We were very much flexion up front with the amount of talent we had. McClare, we had Judas, we had McCluskey at one point, we had Nicholas, and very, very good going forward, but in defence it wasn't so great. And one of the things that we spoke about when we done the extensive podcast in Roy Aitken was that Roy Aitken's position, half the people couldn't decide if he was a defender, the other half of the support couldn't decide if he was a midfielder, and he was kind of stuck in between. But so anyway, his debut, while he didn't score, he sort of shined enough to make a decent impression on his return to Parkhead, because let's be honest, he was a Celtic fan growing up, and it was a big deal for him coming back, and apparently and spending a lot of money. As Liam said, it was a Scottish record at the time, I think. So the press were out, and he was kind of a flashy looking guy. The comparison that came up with regards to him and his lifestyle was a lazy one, but it's the Champagne Charlie, the Charlie Nicholas one, because apparently he was quite fond of. I don't know if you've came across of anything like this. Not so much in the season that I'm about to cover, which is his first season at Celtic, but he had quite a colourful lifestyle, shall we say, off the pitch. Did any of you come across that?
Yeah, I did. I noted that he was probably on the front of the tabloids as much as he was on the back of them for his love of womanising and nightclubbing.
Yeah.
I read some interesting that Celtic had actually there was rumours that he had a bit of a drug problem, and that Celtic actually took the rumours so seriously that they sent him for tests. And I mean the test came back negative. But I mean, if the club are willing to go to those lengths, you think maybe they had their suspicions as well.
I read that they made him take drug tests and it was all negative. I think the board at the time were not the same sort of board that they were kind of like an archaic type board that we had in place with I think it was Desmond White at that point, and he was he sort of ruled things with an iron fist to an extent, and maybe he just thought he's probably believing what he's reading in the press, but I don't think his off-field antics actually helped these matters. He probably could have led an easier lifestyle off the pitch, because when you're living in Glasgow, as a Celtic fan, as we know, just as a basic Celtic fan, it's quite an intense environment. But if you're actually playing for one side of the old firm, then it's going to be even tougher. But in his debut, he never scored. The goals were left to Grant, Burns and McClare. So he's coming into a side with a young Paul McStay, Tommy Burns, Peter Grant, guys like that, some absolute heroes. Danny McGrain's still in the side. We're going to talk about Danny McGrain a little bit, because there's a really famous goal that we were talking about earlier that's from the 86 season. So the Rapid games, again, we're just going straight into November here. The Rapid games were fast approaching, and Davy Hay was doing okay. We'd drawn some games, but we hadn't really lost any games in the league. I think we had played maybe something like 15 games, and we drew like 5 games or something like that. And as I say, we drew the first 3 games of the season, and we drew 4 out of 5 in the first games of the season, which is just, if you start a season like that and you've got intentions to win the league, then it's just you're going to get stung at the end of the season, in my opinion. So we were out the League Cup very early on, but the Scottish Cup starts in January, which is not something I've noticed before. So in the following game we won 3-1 at Dundee United, and he scored, which was his second game for Celtic, and he scored in his first ever goal. And the credit really has to go to Davy Provan here. Now, I don't know if you guys have watched any videos for this, or you just know about Davy Provan's reputation and the ability that he had as a Celtic player. But if I want to just ask you, firstly, do you have an idea of what he was like? And secondly, can you give us a description of the sort of player Davy Provan was, Gary?
From what I can see from this, and obviously we've covered this area a lot, he was just your classic type of winger, constantly taking people on. Perhaps not the from what I can read, the bravest of players in terms of tackling and tracking back and so on, but a very, very good cross of the ball, something akin to like I don't know why Steve Guppy comes out of my head, but that type of player of just kind of classic winger, can cross the ball from anywhere. And yeah, just someone who his career was cut short through illness. I think it was it diabetes or meningitis?
No, it was ME. It was a viral fatigue syndrome.
ME.
Where he just had not a lot of energy. Danny McGrain had diabetes. So interesting. The two of our most famous players from that era, and two of our best players from that era, and two of our most noticeable players from that era, both played football with huge medical issues, and they still managed to succeed. But yeah, Davy Provan is basically a winger, not in the same mould as Patrick Roberts style, more direct, maybe a bit tougher. But apparently, when I was reading the research on Davy Provan, because you end up going off on a bit of a tangent and like down a hallway, all this sort of stuff, which is normal. Apparently, Davy Provan's assist rate would have been in the hundreds. Like, he's set up so many goals for Celtic. His crossing was superb, and the debut goal for Maurice Johnson, the Judas, whatever we want to call him, was set up by Davy Provan. Absolutely roasted the guy on the right hand side and gave the perfect ball. One thing that I did notice in some of these goals, that he scored a lot of goals with his head, Judas, and more often than not he was out jumping the defenders, and I don't think he's that tall. I'm pretty sure he's 5'8", 5'9", but he had a very, very strong head on him. And yeah, the other goal in that game that I want to talk about, and again it's 3-1 to Dundee, Celtic away to Dundee United being our big rivals, was a Murdo McLeod free kick, which was an absolute peach. Murdo McLeod, another player who caught my eye, scoring a lot of goals. Very, very interesting player. Someone who obviously goes on to have a bit of a colourful career after he's been with Celtic, and obviously after he left Celtic with Wim Jansen and that. But anyway, so then came the first Rapid Vienna game, 3-1 we lost. He wasn't in the squad. He wasn't in the squad for any of the games. Now, I don't know why that was, and I'm going to just make a guess that was because he wasn't registered in time, because he was bought about a month before the first tie. So I just assumed that he wasn't registered. I don't really know if that was 100%, or I don't know. But he wasn't in any of the squads. And we do know what happens with Rapid Vienna. And if you don't know what happens with Rapid Vienna, then you just need to go and listen to the podcast, which was episode 9 of History Boys Abroad and that. So, yeah, he's back. The game after the first Rapid Vienna game, we lose to Morton. They actually beat us for the first time in 5 years. I think it was 2-1, but he scores in that game. In fact, he actually goes on a bit of a scoring spree. He scores in almost every game between the Dundee United game, every game that he plays between the Dundee United game and the end of the calendar year. I think he scores in 4 games in a row. Against Dundee United, we win. Morton, we lose. Dumbarton, which was a routine win, I think it was 2-0. And a 5-1 win against Hearts as well. It's quite a decent start when you think about it. This is what, 1984. He was born in 1964, so he's about 20 years old. It's not bad. I mean, when I was doing this and I was thinking earlier on, I was asking on Twitter, like, is there someone that you could compare him to currently playing in Scotland, Gary? Is there anyone that you could think of the sort of record or reputation that he has? I said Jason Cummings earlier on, but I'm just kind of speculating with that. Would you have any other better suggestions?
Not really. I think that's more to do with the kind of paucity of talent that you get out with Celtic in the Scottish League. He seemed one of those players that we seemed to create right about that time. I'm thinking of Steve Archibald, Sturrock, all these just kind of players that can kind of live in any type of company. Archibald obviously went to Spurs, then Barcelona. And he was just that kind of striker, but I think from what I can see, he was a very much of a link-up striker. He wasn't just someone who would kind of hang around the box waiting for scraps. So he was someone who would come back and link up the play. But in terms of what we have at the moment, I think I'd be doing him a disservice to compare him. But he's a prick, so why not? Maybe like a Stevie Naismith. There you go. Yeah. Like that. I think just that kind of a really busy striker, just because someone is always cutting about and kind of in the face of defenders and so on. Yeah, pest basically.
Liam, I'll put the same question to you, but I'll reword it a wee bit. It doesn't have to be Celtic specific. I'm just talking about a young guy that's played in Scotland. 21-year-old Scottish guy that's came through and has made quite a big impact early on in his career. Can you think of anyone in the last 10 years or so that's sort of had a similar sort of impact?
I wasn't going to say somebody that's young, but currently I'd say maybe Liam Bhoys at Ross County. Somebody that obviously relating to how he played at Thistle, but Bhoys at Ross County's been a nuisance, penalty box player, likes to get in a mix of things, and as you saw him against Brown this season, he's not afraid to shy away from things. Plus he's a regular goal scorer as Judas was himself.
Yeah, he did score a lot of goals, and this is kind of one of the problems, that when he played for Celtic, I think he scored something like maybe 51 goals in for like 80 games. Something tells me, I could be wrong. I'll check that, but it's a good record. When he played for Celtic, he was a good player, and obviously we know he ends up leaving Celtic. and maybe we'll talk about why he left Celtic. I'm not sure if you know. I can maybe have some suggestions why he left Celtic the first time and went to France. I think it was maybe to do with the goldfish bowl thing we spoke about, but we'll get to that. But as I say, if you look at the stats, he goes on a bit of a wild run and scores in almost every game until the new year, and he scores a big hat-trick as well. He scores a hat-trick at home to Dundee. We actually score a hat-trick 3 games in a row. So we scored a hat-trick against... We have the game against Dundee, where we score a hat-trick. Brian McClare scores a hat-trick against Hearts. In the next game we win 7-1 against St Mirren. McGarvey scores a hat-trick. In the game after that, Judas scores a hat-trick against Dundee. So what's that? 5 goals, 7 goals and 5 goals. So it's 17 goals in 3 games. Davy Hayes Celtic, not exactly known for much, but it's a lot of goals. 17 goals in 3 games is incredible, really. So that takes us up to December, and just before the Rapid tie, which was the game at Old Trafford when we had that stupid rule where we were only allowed to play within 300 kilometres or something like that. We played Aberdeen, who battered us 4-2. And right before this game as well, as I say, the Aberdeen game, they basically battered Celtic, and they were our biggest rivals at this point. And I think that sort of maybe derailed Celtic for the game going into the Rapid Vienna tie at Old Trafford. And he does score with a penalty. I think he does take quite a lot of penalties in his time with Celtic, and he actually misses quite a few penalties that I came across. He missed at least 2 penalties. He actually missed one against Rangers, the dead Rangers. But 16 games in the league, and we've won 11 times. Again, 16 games in the league, we've won 11 times. Is that a good record, Liam?
I would say it's a reasonable, decent record. Aye.
Obviously, but we can't compare the 1984-85 season to now, because we are the top dog. We are the richest team in the league. We have the best players in the league, and we have done for quite a while. Gary, would you say that 16 games and 11 wins in the league between the start of the season and I think the season started on August the 11th? Do you think that that's a good return for a? Bearing in mind the context of the middle of the 80s, Aberdeen are winning, Dundee are winning. I think Aberdeen do back-to-back titles.
Yes, I think from what I can see around about this time as well is that even though there was a few strong teams at the top, there was still a bit of draw. So I don't think all of the teams were professional. I think, well, most of them, but maybe, well, at this time I'm thinking a little bit before, but it's not like it is now, whereby you would see, I mean, you can still see in some of the pictures of some of the games the size of some of the opposition players, and you're like, how the fuck was that person a professional footballer? But yes, I think in the context of the time, I think playing away nowadays does not have, like, it doesn't really have the same type of fear that you'd have then. I think back then teams could take points off people when they were playing at home and so on. So yeah, if you're taking it into context, and now it's not so great, but I think for the time it's a pretty good record.
Yeah, as I say, Celtic were not exactly the best team in the country at that point, and we were up against 2 very strong sides in Aberdeen and Dundee United, and obviously the rivalry with Rangers was around then. They just weren't as good as Celtic back then. I just want to have a wee quick look. Yeah, Rangers finished 4th. That's the season I'm talking about. Aberdeen first, Celtic, Dundee United, then Rangers. Rangers actually draw. Well, the Rangers actually finish on 38 points with St Mirren, which just we're kind of building up to this moment where things change in Scottish football for good, and sort of the beginning of the end for Rangers is imminent, because when we start talking about the circumstances when he signs for Celtic, again, I'm doing inverted commas here. You can't see that obviously because it's not a video podcast, but when the David Murray thing, sort of throwing money around and then obviously getting one over Celtic by signing not only a high profile Catholic but a guy that played for Celtic and a guy who had signed for Celtic apparently. That was the sort of beginning of the end for Scottish football, but that's a whole other thing. So we finished the calendar year. I just want to actually add one more thing. As I say, Celtic beat Dundee. We beat Dundee 5-1 December the 1st, and I say Johnston scored a hat-trick. I just want to, I've got a little clip from a newspaper article here, and it says, Celtic are without a doubt the most impressive and intimidating team in Scotland at the moment. Their 5-1 demolition of a very competitive Dundee side at Parkhead must send a shudder through every team in the country. It was let me see. It was that disgraceful UEFA decision to force Celtic into a replay with Rapid Vienna, which has sparked off the most devastating goal blitz the Premier League has seen. So quite clearly, the guy who was the journalist Jack Adams at Parkhead, he's quite seems to be quite one of the boys in that. But yeah, so you can see the sort of form Celtic were on. And as I say, we scored 17 goals in 3 games, which just never really happens. So we finished the calendar year. We kind of in the run up to the end of the calendar year, which the season finished on the the calendar year. The last game of the calendar year was against Dundee United, and we lost that game. So we started the season August 11th with a draw. We finished the first half of the season with a loss. So when you start, you've bookended the start of the season and you've bookended halfway through the season with dropping points left and right, then you're just going to struggle to win anything that season. But although we do win the Scottish Cup, before that we do play Rangers and we draw 1 each, and McClare scores the goal. And prior to that we also play against Hibernian and Judas scores the goal, a 1-0 victory. So we finished the season with a win, draw, loss, which is just not good enough, to be honest. So we move into January 1985, and I think he scored about 9 goals in 11 games, which isn't a bad record in my opinion. And to compare him with McClare, who signed the previous season for 75 grand. Now, I just looked at McClare's record the previous season and compared it with where Judas was at the same point, and I think he had scored 11 goals in 19 games by the same point, and Judas had scored 9 goals in 11 games. Bearing in mind, Judas signed in October, like towards the end of October, whereas the season before, McClare signed in July, so he had a pre-season and he had more games to play. But the record is kind of similar, although one has scored more goals because he had played more games, which makes sense. In the season before, as I say, McClare ended up with 31, which is a decent return. First game of the 1985 year, in the second half of the season, Celtic 2, Rangers 1 at Mordor, no less. Judas misses a penalty. This is a game, I don't know if you've ever watched this game. You can watch it online. It's a really, really bad copy. It's clearly just ripped off VHS, and that's fine. But I think Andy Cameron must have been in the crowd, because there was a specific chant that was going round. Had multiple verses, and it was all about Andy Cameron being a bit of a banger. But yeah, he scores. He misses a penalty. Judas misses a penalty, but he also scores in this goal with a decent header. Again, his prowess in the box when it comes to scoring goals with his head was something that I noticed to be quite impressive. And this is a game where I think Celtic were losing 1-0, and then he scores a goal to come back. And he's at the Broomloan end, the free Broomloan, and he runs and he runs to the exact same position where Samaras ran. He runs to the exact same position for the Samaras New Year game from a few years ago and stands there, and then walks back onto the pitch, and he gets booked, but a Celtic fan runs on and hugs him, and they have an embrace for about 5 seconds, and the two of them are pure hugging each other. So scoring against them, celebrating in front of the Broomloan, celebrating with the fans. He was a Celtic fan, so yeah. And the other goal in that game was Brian McClare, who Judas had a hand in setting up that goal. So there was a lot of talk at this point about David Hay being a little bit unhappy with the squad, and he was wanting to make some changes. I just want to give some quotes and stuff like that. So we're in January, and as I say, we've just beaten Rangers at Ibrox, and Judas had scored one of the goals and he missed a penalty, but he also had a hand in helping set up the second goal for McClare to win 2-1. And David Hay was sort of given a lot of sound bites to the press about not actually being satisfied with the squad, and I'm not entirely sure if people were buying into his ideas and things like that. So he basically said, the article is, I'm just going to read the article, it says, confident Celtic will strengthen their side with new young players, will confused Rangers calculate the price of a 2-1 New Year's Day defeat. I meant every word when I said the same, when I said the time for Celtic sob stories was over. I think he's sort of alluding to how everyone was kind of like, oh, Celtic have been put out because Rapid Vienna, it's bloody this, it's crap, it's garbage, it's boo 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 boo, and I think he was just no, fed up hearing Celtic or this, Celtic or that, we should just be winning games. He says youngsters will be brought in, but it'll be gradual as we still want to top the league. Top candidates are defenders Paul McGuigan and Pierce O'Leary. I also said Davy Hay, the Celtic manager, after watching the side lifting themselves from what looked like a hopeless position to defeat a schizophrenic Rangers at Ibrox on Saturday, accepted the 2 points with a gloom which must be unprecedented amongst victorious Old Firm managers. Hay is a man with team changes on his mind. One will be forced on him, since Roy Aitken will shortly begin a period of suspension. But Hay said others will come and go. Hay is fed up with the sob stories about Celtic. He's out of sympathy with those players who have been feeling sorry for themselves since the Rapid Vienna game at Old Trafford. Hay has promised that some apparently established figures will be replaced. The names and the repercussions can only be guessed at for the time being. It's quite a strong sort of revelation after, beating Rangers in the New Year game halfway through the season, when Celtic have not exactly been amazing. And he comes out and says something like that. And considering all the circumstances, I think that's quite brave to do. And it's not something that I thought Davy Hay had in his character. And maybe he is like that, and I'm just not educated enough to know that. But so yeah, in the next game we play against St Mirren, Judas scores, and that's the Scottish Cup underway. And we dish out a few doons to Hamilton, Inverness, Caledonian Thistle. I think we beat them 6-0. We played Dundee, but it had to go to a replay. In which Judas scored the winner, and by this point I think he's quite a valuable player throughout the season. He comes to Celtic with quite a big reputation, but he's scoring quite a lot of goals, so he's valuable in both senses of the word. He's scoring goals for us we can rely on him, but he's actually cost us quite a lot of money, probably getting a fair amount of goals out of him thus far for the money that we paid. And he scored, and so I said we played against Dundee twice. One was the first game, the second was the replay. He scored in both games. In the Inverness Caledonian Thistle game, Celtic won 6-0. I think Inverness Caledonian Thistle were recently formed by this point, and they were still non-league. Which Celtic player scores the only hat-trick of his career in the Inverness Caledonian Thistle game, boys?
I'm going to go some weird Owen Archdeacon.
Nah. Liam.
Murdo McLeod?
Nah, Paul McStay. The only hat-trick of his career, according to Celtic, the wonderful Celtic wiki. Apparently in this game, I think Danny McGrain went in quite heavy on somebody, and the coach, I think it was like one of these old school coaches, the guy with the big mutton sideburns, big lamb, what do you call them, lamb chop sideburns, and like the wee flat cap sort of came running out the dugout because he saw one of his players get absolutely halved in two by Danny McGrain, and the guy slapped Danny McGrain. Apparently slapped him right in the ear. So I think Danny McGrain, I don't even think he couldn't even react because he was just so shocked. He's just standing there like, what the hell just happened? But anyway, so February 23rd, Judas scores quite an important goal for us, 70 minutes into the game against Aberdeen, who were the champions at this point. So February 23rd, and I watched this game. The game's actually available online. Celtic win 2-0. The first goal's by Johnston, the second goal's by Paul McStay in the last minute. But Johnston scores a really, really nice goal. He I think the ball bounced around the box and he just sort of swivels his body. He stands on one leg, sort of rotates his body and fires the ball into the top of the net. Quite a decent game, quite a decent goal, quite a big game, quite an important goal. March isn't great. 6 games, including the 2 Dundee games that I mentioned because those were in the Scottish Cup. A draw and a loss, and the latter was at home to Hibs, which took us to the game on the 20th of March, which was against Hearts, and Johnson scores. But we win this game due to Brian McClair. Again, for me, Brian McClair is probably the more valuable of the two when it comes to scoring goals. He's more reliable, maybe not so much valuable, but he's more reliable. In 28 games played, as it stands, Celtic, in the middle of March, 28 games played, we're second in the league, 6 points behind Aberdeen, but we do have a game in hand. They have played 29, we have played 28. And then after that, we beat Morton 7-2 away, and McClair scores 4. Judas played the entire match, 7 goals. He was not involved in any of them, as far as I could see. So, this is where we start to surrender the league for once and for all. As I said, at the start of the season, we draw, win, draw, which is completely unacceptable to open a season like that when you've got real intentions of trying to win it. But we basically surrendered the league with a draw, and a loss at the end of April into the start of May. We are still in the Scottish Cup final. We're still in the Scottish Cup. But yeah, this part of the season is where Brian McClair sort of comes into his own and basically turns it on for us and starts scoring a lot of goals, and he becomes the sort of focal point of the team. And as I say, considering he cost a fraction of what we paid for Judas, I would, if I was to choose one, I would be picking Brian McClair at this stage. And as I say, we drew, then we lost, just coming in at the end of the season, and the loss was against Dundee, and I think it was at Celtic Park, and I think it was the first time Dundee have beaten us in 10 years. So, kicking our breeks at the wrong time, quite a common tale in Celtic's history when you're looking back, when it comes to crunch time. The bottle isn't there, although things have changed significantly since then. The final league game of the season is against Dumbarton. A 2-0 win, McClare and Willie McStay scores. And then to rewind it a wee bit, now I'm going to just do this wee thing here because it's funny. If anyone thinks that's bad, we'll never do it again, but we're going to rewind it a wee bit and go back to the game on the 1st of May. I thought that was funny. Boys, are you not going to laugh at
that? My mic was off, so we're laughing inside, mate. We're laughing inside.
Currently sitting on mute. Don't talk over you, but aye.
Is that what it is then?
Aye.
We'll stop doing these wee sound effects. This new technology we're using. It's opened up a whole world of things. So
of shit posting.
Say that again.
A whole new world of shit posting.
Bad part of me. Anyway, that's the end of that. So I wanted to rewind it back to the 1st of May. I kind of glossed over the 1st of May, and then I realised there was a big game against Rangers. The game was known as the Janefield Street Riot. Have you heard of it?
I think again we may have spoke about it on a previous podcast, but
it'll be the Roy Aitken one. It's not something that I want to spend too much time on, but essentially Celtic played Rangers. I think the game was 1 each. I don't think. Let me just double check that. I'm not saying no. Yeah, 1 each. Alan McInally scored the goal for Celtic, but Rangers get 2 players sent off. They finished the game with 9 men. Rangers got a dodgy penalty. Celtic missed a penalty, and there was a riot on the pitch. I think on the pitch there was a riot outside the ground. When you're looking at the photos, it looks like a war zone. Casuals running left and right. Apparently there was balaclavas involved, and you know when the balaclava's involved, it's quite tricky and a wee bit serious. But yeah, it was just a real problem. And when you're looking at
when we look back at this, just the I think from the research that we've done before, the police for some reason just tried to escort a big group of Rangers fans through, or they just tried to stop Celtic fans moving to let a big group of Rangers fans through in a kind of unprecedented type of way. Usually it's very segregated and they go that way, you go this way and so on, but for some reason the police have decided to change that and just give that kind of police escort to a few hundred Rangers fans through the Celtic end, and it just, with obviously calamitous consequences.
Yeah, and it was, as I say, it's known as the Janefield Street Riot. There's a big entry for it on the Celtic Wiki, a separate entry out with the game report, and there's like witness reports, and like Celtic released a big statement and the police released statements, and it was just a running battle on the streets, which is not something that we've ever really experienced in our lifetimes. Bearing in mind, I was alive at this point. I guess Liam was as well. Gary, you weren't, but I was only like 2 years old, so clearly I wouldn't have been involved. But yeah. So we're in the Scottish Cup, still in the Scottish Cup. That's kind of all we've got left to play for, and I think that draw that I mentioned there against Rangers, that kind of just gave Aberdeen everything. The title was in Aberdeen's hands; it was theirs to lose. So Aberdeen were pretty solid, pretty reliable, quite a comfortable side. I think it's something that St Anthony actually mentioned on the podcast with yourself, Gary, that Aberdeen were just very resilient and they knew how to win games, and they might just sit back and soak it all up, and they would just hit you, and they knew how to win games. And so we kind of, with that draw against Rangers, that just sort of signalled the end of Celtic winning the league. But in the Scottish Cup, after beating Motherwell in another replay, due to scoring 2 on a 3-0 win, we faced Dundee United in the final. Do you know anything about this final?
1985 final.
Cup one, is that the 2-1 final?
Yeah,
did you not cover it? And is that the Frank McGarvey podcast you covered it?
It is the Frank McGarvey. Frank McGarvey scores a wonderful headed goal. One of his trademark goals, I guess, where he uses, I think, every sort of muscle in his body to arc his whole shape to ping it into the top of the net. I think McClare actually started on the bench for this game, which was kind of controversial because up to this point, Davy Hay had been relying on McClare, and as I say, this McClare comes sort of into his own at the end of the season and carried Celtic, but he started on the bench. Burns and McStay started, but they eventually got subbed, and I think McStay admitted that he wasn't playing well enough. And it took those subs, and it took McClare coming off the bench, and it took moving Roy Aitken. This is Roy Aitken's game, basically. Roy Aitken from defence to midfield. That just changed the dynamic of the game. And this trophy was quite significant because it was the first of Davy Hay's career as a manager, and also it was the 100th Scottish Cup final, so it had an added incentive for Celtic to go out and win that. And as I say, the goals were really, really good. The first goal was Davy Provan. I can't remember. I think it was a free kick with Davy Provan.
It was.
I'm 99% sure it was. fantastic free kick. You have to watch it. There's no, like, it's one of those ones, just 99 times out of 100 it's not going in, it just sort of goes in right into the top hand corner. One thing I noticed about then as well, which I always liked in continental football, is the size of the net at the back was always like bigger, so when the ball sort of flies into the net it goes right in, and Hampden had that at that point and it looked pretty cool. But as I say, the game is mainly memorable for that goal, for McGarvey's contribution, but also the McGarvey's goal, but Roy Aitken in that marauding run for Roy Aitken placed that wonderful pass for McGarvey to score the goal. And Provan actually said that the goal that he scored was the most important goal he ever scored of his career. There's one more thing I want to add before I hand it over to Liam. Why is that game significant? What was important about that game? Like, there was some sort of like kind of like small trivia related to that game. Does anyone know?
Was it the first? I was going to say first televised final, but that can't be right. No idea.
Liam?
I was going to say, was it relating to, was it the first trophy in a while? I'm not too sure.
No, it was the McStay brothers. I think it's the first time in, I can't even think offhand that two brothers played in the same team and won the Scottish Cup final, especially for Celtic. So Willie McStay and Paul McStay both won and played. I'm pretty sure both played in that game.
So what you're saying is the McStay brothers are better than the De Boer brothers?
Not as good as the Chuckles, but better than the De Boers. Should I do the drum roll for that one or what?
Nah, I think we've done enough of that.
For that one.
Right, sound that. I'll wind that in then. So just to finish then. So our man, 34 games, 19 goals, decent return. Again, he's only 20 years old. So, Liam, what do you have?
Well, season 1985-86 didn't start as well as the season 84-85 ended. The league started with 4 wins and 3 draws. There was a few, obviously, jobbers, so to speak, with the likes of a wins over Clydebank, and but then obviously draws at home to Rangers, draws at home to Hearts, or like obviously taking the edge off of the game. The first game to note was obviously facing Atletico Madrid in the Cup Winners' Cup after winning the Scottish Cup. But before they faced Atletico Madrid, there was a 5-0 away win to Hibs in the league after drawing 4 each a few days before in the League Cup. Johnston scored 2 in the 5-0 away win to Hibs, and then he also scored away to Atletico Madrid to get the crucial away goal. The game against Atletico Madrid was the first game since the 1974 Shame Game. It was also highlights were shown on the UK TV due to the fact that English clubs were still banned at that point, and Big Packy Boner saved a penalty in that game, surprisingly. You know, he's prone to a few clangers in his time. Obviously then that led on to the return leg of the Atletico Madrid game, which Celtic lost 2-1. Although this game had the consequences of the Rapid Vienna game, which you've obviously mentioned in detail. Obviously there's a podcast on it where Celtic had to play the game behind closed doors. There was only 170 people were allowed inside the stadium, and even the press, people for the radio, TV, Celtic officials all needed a ticket to justify that they were a genuine person that was allowed in that day. The game kicked off at 2 in the afternoon. Johnston didn't score that day, but obviously he played and was a significant part of the team. The team that day was Boner, McGrain, Burns, Aitken, McGuigan, Grant, Provan, McStay, Paul McStay, Johnson, McLeod, McClare. Again, it was the team they were facing were obviously a decent side because they went on and reached the final, although they were beat 3-0 by Dynamo Kiev and Lyon. The season itself was a bit topsy-turvy. It was a bit up and down. I don't think Celtic really got going. There was games that sort of stood out, but there were games that wasn't stood out. They went on. One of the things that took my eye was they went on a 3 straight losing streak against Dundee United, Aberdeen, then Rangers between October and November of 1985, which I'm guessing, obviously, as you noted earlier on, that the league was obviously more competitive. but you would think in this current climate, if Celtic were in a 3-game losing streak against these sort of teams, you would be questioning, especially since the Dundee United game was at home, and they lost 3-0 to Dundee United, although this was around the era when Dundee United and Aberdeen were the dominant forces. Other games that had throughout this season that were obviously of note was there was obviously New Year's derby with Rangers, which obviously a turn of the year would have been 86. Johnston didn't feature. You notice I've been saying Johnston every time here, by the way. You've not been booing me. He didn't feature.
Try and just get into the habit. Like it's either I've been thinking about this far too much because I had a lot of time in my hands this weekend. It was going to be Judas, or he's known as the Le Petit Merde.
I know. Do you know? All my notes have wrote Judas, and every
I've
time I say Judas, I say Johnston.
I've wrote Judas. We could have just called him Jobby.
But no,
feel free to. But saying Johnston. I want to ask the game against Atleti. He scores the goal in the Calderon. Did you manage to find footage of that?
No, I couldn't find footage of it, but I'm sure you probably would. As I said, it was obviously due to the English teams being banned for Europe due to it was there was the fans writing. Is that the reason why they get banned again?
I think so, because there was the Hillsborough thing, and then the Taylor report and all that was kind of around about this time, so things were all changing. But the reason that Celtic were banned at this point was because of the Rapid Vienna ties, wasn't it?
Yes. Celtic were obviously having to play behind closed doors due to the Rapid Vienna, but obviously that didn't affect them when they went away. Hence why it was just. Although this was obviously the first time they played Atleti since the shame game, but there was a lot of Celtic fans didn't go. Supposedly only 73 Celtic fans went to the Calderon, and it stated, according to Celtic Wiki, it stated that not one of them was for Scotland. So as you can see, that there's obviously a few fans were thinking about the consequences that might happen to them when they turn up in Madrid. Well, more than a few, the majority of them. The one at Partick, like it says, that was played behind closed doors due to the result of the Vienna game, where, as you went in depth previously on the previous podcast about it. But the season,
and like you said, in October we have 3 losses in a row. Was the game against Rangers, was that at home or away?
It was away. The only one. It was Dundee United at home where they lost 3-0, and
Aberdeen away.
It was away to Pittodrie where they lost 4-1, and then away to Ibrox where they lost 3-0. So it's
quite a harsh run of games, isn't it?
It is, but it's quite a bit of a spanking in each game as well. Losing by a 3-goal deficit against 3 of your biggest rivals, which you would expect maybe a bit more of a better performance, especially since the way the team was playing previously and how much a good rapport like Johnston and McClare had. Like, it was well documented that Johnston and McClare both had a good rapport, and both obviously contributed heavily to the Celtic attack. But even just the teams, like at this time, when you look at it on paper, like the team isn't a bad team. Like the team that lost to Dundee United at home 3-0 was Bonner, McGrain, Burns, Aiken, McGuigan, Grant, McClare, McStay, Johnson, McLeod and McAnally. So again, like, you would expect a team like that to comfortably at home comfortably beat Dundee United, but I know Dundee United were a bit of a form team, and that's when obviously the birth of the new firm occurred around about this time. But I don't know, there's obviously
like, you've got against Dundee United, who won the league a couple of years before this, away 3-0. Then we lose at Pittodrie, who Aberdeen at this point are champions. We're up to Pittodrie straight off the back of playing at home against Dundee United, and then we go to Murder and we score 1 goal and we concede
3, 4, so 10
games. We lose 10 goals in 3 games. It's just not good enough.
It was just obviously substandard, and there seemed to be a lot of that happening throughout the season, where teams were obviously taking points off Celtic that should be taking points off Celtic. But then, as I says, they went to Ibrox on the 1st of January they played never mind Ibrox. The 1st of January game was at Partick. They beat Rangers 2-0, and Johnston didn't feature then. The team that day, Johnston was injured. He was missing with flu, and the team that day was Bonner, Willie McStay, McGrain, Aiken, McGuigan, Grant, McClare, Paul McStay, McGee, Burns, Archdeacon. There was also the jungle that day also taunted McCoist with chance for Ali for Scotland due to his terrible performance he was having that day. So it was McCoist was obviously getting it tight from the jungle, but I'm sure a lot of people got it tight for the jungle. I don't know how much you remember about the jungle, but for me, I can remember as a boy it was an intimidating place, so I wouldn't like to be a player on the park.
It would probably be good to do a podcast on the jungle and the history of it and what it meant to people and the experiences they had. That's probably an idea to do a podcast, because we kind of have a jungle these days with the standing section and the Green Brigade and the amazing atmosphere that they've brought to Celtic Park. They're a massive asset to Celtic these days, and it might be good to sort of revisit that and maybe try and draw some parallels with that, but that's for another day. That would be an interesting podcast. I guess it's like you say, how it's almost gone full circle. We're a standing section now, and the sort of the atmosphere that they create and the intensity that they create. But as I said, the season was a bit topsy-turvy, and it doesn't really kick in for Celtic. There was like a lot of draws, like drawing at home to St Mirren, drawing at home to Hearts, drawing at home to Dundee United, like through February and March. Like there was just a lot of like just flat games for Celtic, and it wasn't. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. Like there was obviously something not right in the team. There was obviously maybe a lack of leadership and maybe a lack of direction, but from Davy Hay, maybe there was a bit of unrest because it was halfway through the season and Brian McClare put in a transfer request, so there must have been something not right with the team for one of your key players to put in a transfer request mid-season. The season never really kicked on for Celtic until the tail end of it, when they had a 4-each draw away to Rangers. On that day, it was I'm sure Johnson scored Judas scored the opening goal, with McClare, Burns and McLeod scoring. The team that day was Bonner, Willie McStay, White, Aiken, O'Leary, McLeod, Paul McStay, Burns, Archdeacon, McClare and Johnson. It wasn't until this point in the season that Celtic actually picked it up, and they took it forward and progressed from here to, obviously, I'm assuming everybody would know what happens in the season 85-86. It was obviously a very big season as a Celtic fan, and from this point the Celtic team go forward and go on a 8-game winning streak where Johnson scores 5 goals in the run, with one of the games being away to Pittodrie, where he scores the only goal of the game. It was the first win up at Pittodrie in 4 years, and
first win
up at Pittodrie in 4 years, and the fans stayed behind that day, stayed behind for 15 minutes, shouting, and the players particularly shouting at Johnson. And 10 minutes after the final whistle, he came out and was applauded by the fans, and he lapped it up and the fans lapped it up. So
I think there was definitely a rapport between him and the fans. As I say, he was a Celtic fan. When he scored the goal against Rangers in the previous season I covered there just a minute ago, the guy ran on the pitch and they had this embrace on the pitch, like they had an embrace, they held each other, they hugged each other. It was all very, very nice. So
I think it relates to obviously his style of person that he was, like how off the park he was drawing headlines for the wrong reasons, but I think on the park he was drawing the headlines for the right reasons. And I just get the impression that he was just somebody that wanted to be and talked about in the press, like no matter what he was doing, just everything that I've read into it. Like at the same time, I don't think he was the brightest of people, but that's my take on it. And
I think I got that impression as well, that he just, kind of probably lacked in a level of intelligence to really appreciate.
I think he's someone who played. I think he very much played to the gallery. I think, and as we can see, obviously we'll see in the future from the point we're at now. But he's someone who kind of knew how to curry favour with people, and it perhaps wasn't the most genuine of things. He was just kind of reacting to the situation, and I think he's definitely someone that would have played together. Dare I say, a Celtic version of Nacho Novo. You can put an Abu in there if you want, mate.
No, they're all right, pal. No, so Liam was saying that we had this in February into March. We drew 4 games in a row. Then something just clicked, and Liam said the catalyst was a 4-4 draw away to Rangers with Johnston scoring, McClare scoring, Burns scoring, and McLeod scoring. So Liam, take us up to what happens in the Scottish Cup that season.
Scottish Cup, Celtic lost in March. It was a 4-3 to Hibs. They also went out of the League Cup that year. To Hibs again at Easter Road. They drew 4 each, and then obviously Hibs went on and won it later. It must have been extra time, but Celtic lost 4-3 to Hibs. They would obviously this resulted in Hay being under extreme pressure for losing it a second time, losing 8 goals in 2 cup ties against Hibs. Out of both cups, not challenging for anything after. How they performed the previous year in the Scottish Cup. It was just a bit of a flat year, and obviously the way the season was going up and down, and there was nothing really pressing. It wasn't really into the 4-3 occurred just before the 4 each draw. So it was. I'm guessing the league was the only thing left to play for. As a Celtic fan, technically, you were probably thinking the league wasn't there either, because you're out of 2 cups. You're looking at the league. You had to go to Partick to win. You hadn't won in 4 years. Yes, you get the win, but is there really that much of a hope when you're out of 2 cups? You're not really playing that strongly.
Nah, it just seems like the season's plodding along. It seems like season 85-86, it's just not starting very. It's not going to amount to anything. As I say, out of the Scottish League Cup by September the 4th, and then you're out of the Scottish Cup by March 8th, which is only the quarter-finals, because the Scottish Cup doesn't start until January of that year. So you're just plodding along, and you think this is going to be one of these seasons. Nothing really happens, and then bang, there's a roll of games where Celtic just go and start smashing teams. Dundee get smashed, Clydebank, St Mirren, Aberdeen, Hibernian, Dundee again, Motherwell, and then St Mirren. And obviously the St Mirren game. So what happens in the St Mirren game? For those that don't know the St Mirren game, tell us about it.
The St Mirren game is one of the most pivotal games probably in this era of Celtic. They go into the game and Celtic are 2 points behind Hearts. This is when the league was only 2 points for a win. Hearts are top of the table, and they are away to Dundee. Celtic have to win the game, and not only do they have to win the game, they have to win by 3 clear goals and hope that Hearts lose. On this day, Celtic win 5-0, but that's insignificant, because it's not until late on in the game against Hearts when Albert Kidd pops up, a renowned Celtic fan as well, comes off the substitutes bench and scores to make sure that Dundee obviously win the game, which results in Celtic winning the league that day. Celtic that day, I watched, there was a YouTube clip that I watched, and they just looked frightening. Every time they went forward, they looked as if they were going to go. They were going to score a goal. Maurice Johnson scored 2 goals that day. The first one was McStay wins the ball in the middle of the park, plays him through, and he cuts in through sort of the right hand side of the box and drills it low across the face of the goal. The second one, which is if you look it up, it says it's noted as one of the greatest ever Celtic goals, which I would have to agree with when you see the play, but it sickens you the fact that it's that wee Judas that obviously scores it at the end. It was.
I'm going to need to beat that, mate. I'll end up beating that. No, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, we were speaking earlier about it, and you made the comparison against the goal St Johnstone in the season.
Yes.
It's just there. But I would suggest this goal was maybe a little bit better, because the speed at which Celtic move the ball is just amazing. The actual pace. I think part of it's to do with the camera. The fact the camera's very, very low and you get very up close and you can see the movement of the players. And Paul McStay's Cruyff turning all over the place. And then obviously Danny McGrain's off, and then there's a nutmeg involved with Brian McClare and squares it right across the box, and I made the point, it was an easy finish. But what was it you said, Liam?
Well, you said an easy finish, but I said it was the hardest finish because that's the hardest part of it. It doesn't matter how beautiful the build-up play is. The hardest part is putting the ball in the net.
That's it, mate. The ultimate contrarian. I like that. So the game is extremely significant. So Celtic were out of the 2 cups. We were out of every cup apart from the league. And I have the statistics here. We finished joint on points with Hearts, the same amount of points, but we have a better...
Hearts finishing 27, plus 27, and Celtic finishing plus 29. So they won it on goal difference.
We won 20, we drew 10 and lost 6, and Hearts had the exact same. So tight. So tight. Played 36, won 20, drawn 10, lost 6.
Challenged in the end by Hamilton. But once again, Celtic have a corner kick. And a great header by Brian McClair. 6 minutes gone, and McClair does it again for Celtic. Well, it couldn't have been simpler or more effective. The in-swinger from Archdeacon, McClair with a run towards the near post, a powerful header, and Stewart was left stranded. Darby set flick, played back by McGugan. McClair doing well, winkling the ball free to McStay. Here's Mo Johnston. It's there! Mo Johnston, the Celtic fans' hero. 52 minutes of the first half gone, it's 2-0 to Celtic, and it was brilliantly set up by this pass from Paul McStay. Johnston was one thought in his head, racing in and goal. The power beat Jim Stewart, and Celtic are now 2 ahead. Abercrombie into space, McGrain with a delicate ball to Murdo McLeod. Here's Paul McStay. Finding Aiken, now McGrain. Celtic in full cry now as McClair gets free on the right. There's Johnston. Absolutely magnificent. One of the goals of the season. Set up inside the Celtic half. The final ball from McGrain releasing Brian McClair. His pace and the final pass to Johnston was perfect. And Stewart this time completely helpless. Abercrombie. McGrain. Murdo McLeod. Bums. No question about it. Celtic are certainly playing like champions. Archdeacon testing Tom Wilson. Makes his way to the byline. Here's Murdo McLeod now. McStay. 4-0 to Celtic. Paul McStay thundering in goal number 4. And it was down to the creative play of Archdeacon on the left. Now look at the way he gets away from Wilson. Holds off the challenge. Now the dummy from Murdo McLeod. How about this? A thunderous finish. Stewart never moved. White to McStay. Someone trying to play Celtic offside. We failed. Here's Johnston. Now Murdo McLeod. McClair. 9 minutes into the second half. 5-0 to Celtic, and that one certainly with a tinge of good fortune. McStay beat the offside trap. Johnston hanging back, going forward. Playing it back to McLeod. He tried a shot for goal, miscued completely, and McClair took advantage. The ball landing at his right knee. Paul McStay. Well, Stewart needed 2 bites. Now that must be a goal for Dundee. Sheer bedlam around the stadium. Well, you don't need to hear any more news than that. Dundee clearly has scored at Dens. And let's lift off here at Clough Street. Oh, what incredible scenes. Spears with a layoff. And there's the final whistle. Celtic have won by 5 goals to 0. And he Liam McGrain goes on to convey the news of the position at Dens Park. The Celtic supporters invade the field, but still no news at all from Dens, who can turn the final whistle on, although surely now it's only a formality to hear that Celtic have won the league championship in the most dramatic fashion. And the celebrations continue despite the steady downpour of rain. None of these Celtic supporters have noticed the difference, and I'm sure the players feel exactly the same. Well, these are the happy scenes which looked impossible just about a week ago, but in a tremendous finish to the season, Celtic going 14 league games undefeated. They've come through in the end to win on the last possible day of the season, with just minutes left when they got the news from Dens Park about Dundee beating Hearts. The celebrations began, they've been going on ever since. The rain teeming down, and the Celtic players now going right round the stadium in their lap of honour. And on the performance this afternoon...
So the season came to a close with a 5-0 victory away to St Mirren, Hearts losing 2-0, and the significance of that was that Celtic won the league that year after looking down and out several times. In that season, Judas scored 39 appearances and 23 goals in that season, with 32 appearances in the league and 15 goals in the league, which is almost a goal every 2 games. So it's a pretty impressive stat that they had, and you can see why he was obviously a key player for us. But obviously this then progresses on to season 86-87, which Gary will look at in depth.
Yep,
Your time to shine, Gary.
Sorry?
Time to shine, my man.
My time to shine, indeed. So, this is his final season of his spell at Celtic, and it's a season, obviously, we've just come off the back of winning the league in dramatic fashion, and I think there was real hope that the team would kick on from that, because remember, this would be this is going to be the 3rd year of David Hayes' reign, the 4th year rather. So, it hadn't been great up until then. The kind of winning of the league kind of hopefully signalled a change, and it kind of, in contrast to what you guys spoke about, Celtic actually started this season very, very well. We won our first 3 games, couple of draws and wins, but up until around December we're cruising, and I think we end up 9 points ahead at one point. Johnson's a big part in this early part of the season. He scores 11 in his first 12 league games. I think if you take in the cup games as well, he scores around 13 and 14, which is prolific. It's a goal a game. It seemed to be this season you saw that he scores in bursts, and I think from what you guys saw as well, he was a fairly consistent scorer, but he also had his little bursts where he'd score 2 in one game, 1 in the next, another 2, and so on. But he's on form while Celtic are on form, and we actually have a very good defensive record at the start of this season, which is not really in keeping with what we usually are. He scores 2 against Shamrock Rovers in October. We got them in the first round of the European Cup, and we just kind of cruised through. He scores in the game against Dynamo Kiev, but we then lose a away leg of that 3-1. So we're out of Europe fairly early, which is kind of symptomatic of the times. So we're in very good form. We get to the League Cup final, and this is the kind of one of the big games for Mo Judston in this season, not because of anything that he actually does football wise, but it's a kind of bit of a shame game in the fact that Celtic feel that they were robbed, and the referee David Syme was he was seen as being not very favourable to the Celtic players, and Mo Judston gets sent off. We lose this game 2-1, and Mo Judston gets sent off for a second bookable offence, and as he's going off the park, he blesses himself, and this causes all hell breaks loose, and especially when you consider what happened in the future. It was a big part of his early Celtic career, and it kind of defined that image of him as a Celtic player. So he's kind of running by the Rangers fans. They're obviously taunting him. Rangers 2-1 up, a couple of minutes to go in the cup final, and he gets a second yellow card, and he trudges off the park, and it's a kind of bit of a shame game for him. Celtic actually fine him for this, and I think this is kind of the start of the disconnect between Mo Johnston and Celtic, whether that be the board or the club itself. And he crosses himself as he's going off, and I don't know if any of you guys have seen that, but it's a bit of an iconic image of his spell with Celtic.
I haven't seen it, but I know that the aftermath is, and correct me if I'm wrong, was this not a game where before the game every Celtic player went to mass together but Johnston didn't go?
Yes, and that's it. That was the kind of thing that you think about when you consider that there was a mass on the morning of the game, and he was the only one who didn't play. The symbolic act of him crossing himself seems a bit hollow when you consider that, well, he wasn't what you call a practicing church-going Catholic, which we won't hold against him.
I think the thing that was hollow was between his ears. I'm getting the impression that maybe he lacked some basic intelligence or some sort of self-awareness that some other players might have had. What game was this? I know the result. When was this match?
It was in October, so obviously this is the time of the League Cup, which was kind of wrapped up by the end of October, so I think it was October 26th, if I'm not mistaken.
That was my birthday that day. I just turned 4, so happy birthday to me.
Aye, well, do get a wee happy birthday jingle on there. So we've got, so this is kind of, as you see, and this is the start of his contract's up at the end of the season, along with Murdo McLeod and Brian McClare. So there's a lot of chat around about this time, it's like, well, they sign new contracts and so on, because this is the time where, even before the Bosman ruling, there was a kind of change in the contract law, which meant that it used to just be that if the club offered you the same terms that you had the year before, the club could keep you. But it changed sometime, I don't know the exact time, but around about the mid-80s, and you started seeing players leaving on and a tribunal would determine the fee. So there was a lot of chat about him possibly leaving the club and so on. I should say this is a season where he scores 29 in total in a course of 52 games. Brian McClare's even better, he scores 41 in 52. And basically, Alan McInally as well, he's big Rambo, he scores 16, and they make up the vast majority of our goals. So we're really reliant on McClare and Johnson this season. And it just actually makes it, because they both end up leaving at the end of the season, actually makes it quite a feat when you see the job that Billy McNeil done in the centenary season, when you lose that amount,
70 goals between them. Exactly. McClare and Johnson scored 70 goals between them that season. That's incredible.
It's incredible when you consider that there wasn't much goals coming from midfield. You had Paul McStay, Murdo McLeod. McLeod scored 5 and McStay scored 4. So I mean, without these guys, if they weren't firing, then Celtic weren't, and it just shows you how important he was to the team at this time. And he's kind of coming into what would probably be considered towards the peak of his career. And so we start off well, and obviously the League Cup kind of signals a bit of a change. We still have a pretty good November, but going into December we'd have a disastrous, one of those ones that Celtic seem to have sometimes. You just 1 win out of 5. We had 3 draws, and so 3 draws, a defeat and 1 win in December, and this kind of brings Rangers back into it for the New Year game, and Rangers win the New Year game. And this is what you got to remember, is this is a rejuvenated Rangers team as well. They've signed Butcher, I think they've signed Woods as well by this point, so 2 England internationals, and obviously with the Souness thing as well, it just kind of, they're a much stronger challenge this year. So we move into January, we have a very good win, and the goals kind of dry up for Johnson. He scores 2 against Dundee in December, then he doesn't score in the league until January 24th, so he just has a bit of a barren spell, but because of the type of nature of the players that we had, when he's not scoring, then McClare might pop up with goals as well, so it's not so critical at this stage. So he scores 2 in a 2-1 win at Falkirk, and that's when he kind of gets back on his score sheet. And obviously there's chat in the papers at this time that Atletico have shown interest, and they're one of a number of clubs as well, so they're the latest club, so he's very much in demand across Europe, and obviously with his contract situation. Sorry?
We're talking about Judas or McClare?
Judas, sorry. Yeah.
Right. Well, let me ask both of you, who, like, we've given you the statistics. You should know the statistics. We've been speaking about them. Who would you rather have in your team, McClair or Judas? And like let's on pure football basis, not on cerebral status or idiot status. Who would you prefer?
Without even looking at the stats so much, I'd say McClair purely based on the pedigree of his career. I think he went down to Manchester United, and he was a big part of that early Ferguson team. So I would say McClair based on that.
Liam?
I'd probably agree with that. I think McClair was more a complete player. He seemed more an integral part of like every team he played in. I know Johnston was more of a sort of finisher, probably more prolific in the box, and maybe a bit more of a showman. But I think McClair done more for the team, and as Gary's just pointed out, his career went on to be far more successful than Judas ever was.
I think if you take like on ability alone, then McClair shades it. But if you strip back all the rubbish outside the pitch and the character that Johnston or Judas had, McClair absolutely wins it. McClair was sort of like slightly better footballer and came without the fanfares, kind of like the no frill, straight up going to score 25 goals a season, no questions asked. But yeah, so back to you, Gary.
Yeah, and so we move into February, and our form gets a bit patchy as well. It kind of goes win, draw, loss, win, loss, and it's a bit all over the place. And this means that Rangers getting pole position for the first title in nine years. We have a wee bit of a renaissance. But he's dropped for a game against Clydebank on the 21st of March. Because he got turned on an assault charge. He was fined £500 at the Glasgow court, and he's dropped from the team. So you can see things aren't really going that well for him. I don't know. I would just be speculating, because he only scores 2 in the last 12 games. As we kind of collapsed towards the second half of this season, and we let Rangers in it from a position of power early on in the season with a 9-point lead. And he has a bit of a collapse. I can only speculate. Maybe his head had been turned, or he was looking for his move. But as we can see from this, he's not really. I don't know if his head's where it should be at this moment. You know what I mean? He's got off the field troubles, which kind of always happen to him. He kind of always one of those ones that seem to get himself into bother, and obviously with all the speculation about all these teams and so on, he doesn't perform particularly well towards the end of this season.
Can I just say,
so
I've just noticed, have you noticed anything different in the league that season?
What do you mean?
12 teams, 2 teams have been added, 44 games played, as opposed to the season before, and every season before, 36 games played, 10-team league, so 2 teams have been added, and then 8 games have been added, 8 further games.
Mm-hmm. So that probably helps swell the scoring charts as well for these players, because they've got more games to score these goals in. But so we finished the season for Wimper. Rangers win the first league in 9 years. We actually scored the most goals in this season, and it's obviously mostly in part to these 2 players, and Alan McInally, I must say, scored 15 as well in the league. But our defence is the Huns have just got a much better defence this season. But we concede almost a goal a game, which isn't really Championship form, and especially with there's so many games. So the Huns just seem a bit more solid, and they win the league by 6 points. So it comes as no surprise when he actually does move. It's going to be a summer of rebuilding as David Hay loses his job. Brian McClair leaves as well. He goes a tribunal free to Manchester United. Murdo McLeod moves to Dortmund, and we managed to get £400,000 from the tribunal as Mo Judas, whatever you want to call him, moves to Nantes in France. So this takes us pretty much to the crux of why we're here.
What happens then? Do you want to be the one that deals with
this?
This is the elephant in the room. This is the thing that I don't really know. Well, why do you think it happened? First of all, let's talk about how he fared in Nantes. Do you have any sort of information as to how he competed when he went to France? And as I said earlier on, the reason he left was because I think it was the Goldfish Bowl lifestyle. And as far as
sorry, I didn't add that point, which I should have. He leaves citing the Goldfish Bowl nature of Glasgow and also sectarian abuse from Rangers fans, which, you know, it's funny. Well, at least you could say maybe try to change that, but maybe that's being far too kind to him.
Do you think he's like an early troll, like a troll? Do you think he's just at it? Do you think he knew exactly what he was doing?
I think a chancer. I just think he would say whatever he needs to say in that moment, and you can see by his actions, which we're going to cover now, is that he wouldn't have minded playing to the gallery. He wouldn't have minded saying whatever he needed to say to justify his actions at that time. The type of guy, you know, you don't want to ruin your daughter.
It's funny.
See if he was so bothered by the whole sort of Goldfish Bowl / sectarian abuse, then would you know kind of be the person that's going to be a bit more of a recluse rather than the lifestyle that he did lead?
Aye, with these things, it's always that. It's like it's powerfully close. You know what you're getting, and it's not to justify people acting up and people abusing these players, but you know, he's no stranger to it. He grew up in Glasgow. He understands what that means, and he understands that certain parts of the city you can't go. If you're walking down Glasgow city centre, you're going to get abuse from one side. That's going to happen. As I say, I think it's one of those ones where trying to justify, and I think we see that happening a lot. It's like you see when a player wants to leave, they'll create a situation. It's PR, and clubs do it as well. They try and cast these players out as well. We've offered them these terms and so on, but the club have their ulterior motives. But it's a game of PR, and I think he was just playing that, and I think he didn't really mind, slipping in a couple of half truths.
I think everything. The reason that he decided to do what he did was, I think it just points to a lack of intelligence. There is the financial factor, because Rangers were throwing money left and right to anyone that, you know, they were signing players that they would never have been able to afford. Up to David Murray coming in, they had half the English squad in their side, and I think the story goes he went to Nantes and then he sort of indicated that he wanted to come back. But Celtic were kind of like in a position where they needed to make a signing. They needed a striker because it just wasn't cutting. They had Andy Walker, they brought in McAvenny and Billy Stark and players like that, but if you look at the statistics, the following season, Billy McNeil's returning from, I think Billy McNeil was at Manchester City and then he went to Aston Villa, or was it the other way around? I can't remember. Andy Walker scores 32 goals, which is a decent return. McAvenny scores 18 goals. Obviously, he came from West Ham, and it just seems like, or does he start at Celtic, then go to West Ham, then come back to Celtic, then go back to West Ham? I think that's what it is. But the statistics just drop off. There's a massive drop off, and Billy McNeil sort of establishes that he needs to bring a striker back to the club. When is it again? Like approximately when does what season is it that the debacle happens?
Well,
89,
it's actually it's 89. It's towards the end of that season. So obviously Celtic have had a shit season. It's coming off the back of the centenary season, and I think they finished 5th. But we get to the Scottish Cup final, and that's the thing. The story breaks that he's coming back to sit in the whole. It was a week of the final. I don't know if it was a week of the final. He came with the Celtic top and stuff like that. I think it was early on in that week. You know, he gets paraded. So basically, what happens is, this is what I've from my research that I've seen, is that someone makes kind of overtures to him. I think it might have even been Roy Aitken, but I'm not sure of that. Basically saying to Billy McNeil that Mo Johnston's kind of spoken to him while on Scotland duty and he kind of wants to come back. It's either that or Billy McNeil's asked Aitken to check with him before making an approach. It should be said, I've just checked this up here, that in his 2 years at Nantes he's got a scoring ratio of 1-3, which isn't bad. The French league at the time would have probably been a higher standard than the Scottish league. So I think it's a fairly alright spell there. I don't know, maybe he just misses the kind of glam, I suppose, of being back basically in a place that the media knows him and so on. Maybe he was caught on that. I really have no idea. Maybe he's just homesick. But so that's the kind of overture. So because I remember the final, which we won 1-0, the fans were singing about Super Mo. So it's like the kind of jolt of adrenaline that we needed, I think, at the time, because the support wouldn't have had a good season, and maybe there's just the kind of the optimism of him coming back and stuff like that. just kind of helps the support through a bit of a sticky patch. And it's funny, obviously, because just after he signed for the Huns, a guy was up in court because he ran up to a police officer on the day of the final and started singing "Mo, Mo, Super Mo." So there was a story of this Celtic fan in the court just after he signed for Rangers getting a caution or getting a fine or whatever for breach of the peace for singing a song about Mo Johnston signing for Celtic. So I don't think it was a happy summer for that young fellow.
So he was paraded. You see the picture, the now infamous picture. He's standing with Billy McNeill, and he's standing with assume it's his wife or his girlfriend at the time, and he's paraded. But I think the story goes that Celtic the Celtic board flew to Nantes. They flew out and they met up with him. Everything was agreed. I think they ratified it with FIFA to make sure everything was legit, and then they came back to Glasgow. But he hadn't actually signed. I think it was like a pre-contract agreement. It was like almost like a gentleman's agreement, although probably a bit more legal, but not entirely binding. And then he comes back, and then I think apparently his agent was in the Orange Order and all this sort of stuff. These classic stories.
Bill McMurdo. Yeah,
aye,
Bill McMurdo. Yeah, he was. No, what actually happened is, and this is according to Billy McNeill, was at Celtic, and this is why Billy McNeill was raging at the time. Because Celtic could have blocked the move. It actually was binding. Celtic had agreed. They'd agreed everything. They'd put everything in place, and all Celtic had to do was put the first instalment of the. They had to put the first instalment of the transfer through, which I think was like $400,000. And Billy McNeill was like, "Why don't we do this?" This was after Rangers had paraded him and stuff like that. Why don't we do it and just basically leave him in limbo? And the board refused to do it. They kind of tried to take the moral high ground about it and like, no, if he doesn't want to play for Celtic, then we won't do it. So we could have actually blocked that from happening. I think what had happened as well is that, and this is, I don't think it's been confirmed, but from what I've heard as well, is he had a big tax bill, and I think the Celtic board, there was something to do with his tax, and he didn't really want to. The Celtic board weren't willing to take the liability on it or some stuff. It was kind of, that was part of the negotiation, and negotiation for that broke down. So we need to kind of take this into context of the fact that it wasn't like Celtic had agreed to sign him and then Rangers just came in and stole him just like that. The negotiation with Celtic had broken down, and then Rangers kind of took the opportunity from there to go in and take him.
And I don't think it takes much to get one over Celtic, and it was the biggest in the biggest possible fashion. Not only were they signing their first high profile Catholic, they were signing a die-hard Celtic fan, a guy who was a hero to the Celtic support, and a guy who had just agreed to sign for Celtic and was paraded. It's the ultimate bam up. It's the ultimate bam up. And
you know what, you've got to say, if you're in the position of, and let's be honest, Rangers obviously had this very, very famous policy, but times were changing, and not only were times were changing, I think getting Souness in and Murray, say what you want about them, I generally don't think that they were Protestant bigot type people. I honestly don't think they give a fuck about that. And I think credit to them for the fact that they came in and did want to modernise that. Like they had no real truck with that type of the kind of ugly element of the bigotry that comes from Rangers. And this is something Graham Souness, I'm sure he came in and saw how petty it was. This is a man who's won multiple European Cups, played for Sampdoria. I'm sure he would have come in and went, this is such small-minded, petty thinking. And they were looking for. I think he was looking for a big profile, high profile Catholic side. And I mean, who bigger than someone who's just said that they're going to sign for Celtic and this Celtic fan?
It was perfect.
Yeah, it was set up perfectly for it. The only issue was, would be the player. Like, as a player, I mean, he's been called brave. I wouldn't call it brave as such, because I don't think this was a particularly brave character. I think we can see from his actions beforehand that it's someone who is a bit of an opportunist and saw an opportunity to bet himself. Saw an opportunity to make. I mean, I'm sure he made a lot of money in the signing on fee and so on. So I think it's just someone who was looking out for himself and had really no scruples in doing his reputation away for a bit of money.
it's kind of coming to my attention the past few minutes that he was probably, when it came to going to France, and he kind of, I don't think it was a massive success in France, but 1-3 in a higher league when you've got players like Papin and all that kicking about in the 80s in France, and other players like, I'm pretty sure Moravcik's probably in there at that point as well. So when you see the sort of level he was at was quite high and quite good, and it's probably quite a nice lifestyle, but he sort of craves the Scottish lifestyle. Like, he craves to come back to Scotland. I think he just probably wanted the attention. He actually missed the negative attention. As I say, I haven't watched any interviews with him. I would never ever bring myself to do it. Just from the research that I have done, I kind of get the impression that he probably wasn't as intelligent as he could have been with certain situations, and he probably, from all the limelight stuff, the drug test and the fighting and the fines and like blessing himself and not actually being a mass-going Catholic and just like being a bit of a bam, it strikes me as that he was missing the attention that he would have got in Glasgow, and he probably enjoyed all the negative attention that he got as well. Kind of like a Nacho Novo, like you say, that kind of weird mentality. It's kind of difficult to place, but do you have any idea how he done it, Rangers? Because I can't bring myself to look at these sort of things, but something tells me he wasn't that great.
He was, I think he served his purpose. I think what happened as well is they sold him to Everton, I'm pretty sure it was, for basically what they paid for him. So overall, when you look at that, he was moderately successful. I think he had a good partnership with McCoist for Scotland, and that was kind of part of the reason as well. So he came in, he kind of worked hard. I think it was Hateley then came in, and like that was just the main one, so he just kind of got edged out towards the end, I think. But his record he wasn't as prolific as he was at Celtic, but he still scored enough goals, and I think he contributed. He scored a couple of goals against Celtic as well, including one kind of famous last minute winner at Ibrox, and he didn't hold back the celebrations either, which you can't really have anything to say about that, because at the end of the day he's done what he's done. So he's kind of one of them. But I think it did have more so. It didn't even matter how successful he was for Rangers. It's the debilitating effect it had on Celtic, I think, which made the deal such a success for them. I think the mental toll that it took on the support set us back a good few years, and as you say, it was a tap in for Murray and Souness, because they can just easily just get that thing that not only curries favour with their own fans. It was a masterstroke in any sense of the word. It's just the ultimate get it up you twos. It changes that policy that they've been getting a lot of stick for. It was just win, apart from obviously the few Rangers fans who burnt their season tickets and so on, but they don't like to talk about that.
And they don't. So one little piece of trivia that I came across in my travels was that when he played for the Kansas City, they won the MLS Cup in 2000, and it was quite interesting. It was quite interesting who he actually was playing against and who he was playing with. He was playing against in the MLS Cup. He went to Kansas City, and I'm pretty sure he's still based in America now, which, as far as I know, he's not welcome back in Glasgow. He's certainly not welcome back at Celtic Park. And the guy's Celtic career and Celtic story is long finished. But he played in the MLS Cup final, and I think they won. But he was playing against DeMarcus Beasley and Carlos Bocanegra and Hristo Stoichkov, and the manager was Bob Bradley. It's kind of eras of football players that you just would never associate with each other, because we're talking about the mid-80s, early 80s here, and that was 2000, and players like Bocanegra and what his name is, Beasley, they're kind of more recent of the dead hands,
When he went to America, was he a bit more later in his career? So
I think he finished in America.
Bocanegra and Beasley be starting out, so...
Well, there's a quote from him. So he left Falkirk in 1996, and they just got relegated. And the quote was, "It's disappointing to leave on a low note, and I feel sorry for the rest of the guys left who are going down. But you've got to look after yourself, and I'm looking forward to a fresh start." So this is after he got a $500,000 contract from the MLS. So again, perhaps not the most integral of characters. There's another quite famous quote in his biography. This was before he signed for Rangers. He said, "I might even agree to become Rangers' first Catholic if they paid me £1 million and bought me Stirling Castle. Let me spell out where I stand. I'm a Celtic man through and through, and so I dislike Rangers because they are a force in Scottish football and therefore a threat to the club I love. But more than that, I hate the religious policy they maintain.
Can he mark his neck with a torch, man? The guy is an absolute banger. That's kind of how I want to end that. The guy is just a total banger for saying stuff like that and then doing what he does. I can't work out if he's either really, really stupid or just really, really smart, and something tells me it's the former.
Okay, but I want to kind of pose this question to you. Sorry, I just want to pose this question to both of you. Take off your Celtic hat, right? Just imagine you're not that into football and stuff like that. Do you think this signing, if you're talking about development of the kind of West of Scotland or the Glasgow type of society, do you reckon it was a step in the right direction? If you take out the Celtic, take out the betrayal, take out him, the actual fact that the biggest club and a club that basically through their policy promoted bigotry and promoted that triumphalism, do you think that helped society in some way?
I'll take that one. I'll start. Maybe a little bit. I
you
don't
still
think
about how much I can't hear, don't you?
No, there's a Patrick Swayze advert on telly here, and I'm just looking at it. I think it was for Dirty Dance, so I was quite engrossed in that. Anyway, so I mean, I don't think, because when you think about it, like, if we're going to be honest, there's still not a lot of progression in their side of things. You know what I mean? Like, I can't comment.
I would disagree with that. I think obviously you've still got that hardcore, but I mean general, and it's not just Rangers, it's just like the West of Scotland.
I was about to say, society in general has progressed since that era. Like you used to be straight up, I look at what school you went to, and then that was determined what job you were going to be getting set in. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing obviously something such as high profile and as left field as Rangers did with a signing resulted in it filtering down into all sort of professions then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to overplay it, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's, you know, a team signing a football player, but I don't know if it just, I mean, again, it's a hypothetical question because I don't even know the answer myself.
It's a good question. It's not a question that I don't know. I'm not entirely sure I can answer, because I can't comment on what it was like growing up before I was born, and even in the 80s, because I was too young to appreciate it. But I have one of the most Irish names of all time, and I never really experienced any of that sort of stuff growing up. That's not true. I did experience quite a bit of sectarianism at school, but yeah, it's difficult to say if there was a sort of shift in the mentality. But
yeah, I mean, these things are all gradual. Like nothing changes overnight. But I'm just saying, like, you know, what would the world be like if that? I mean, I think that policy would have went from Rangers anyway. But I think this signing, and, you know, subsequently the fact, you know, you get Amoruso as the first Catholic captain, stuff like that. They are changes, whether they're long overdue or not. They're changes in the psyche of people, and I'm sure there'll be perhaps a subsection of Rangers fans who wouldn't have been there before, because you do see Rangers fans now who generally don't give a shit about that type of stuff, and don't care about what religion someone is. Still obviously have their traditions, so to speak, but I think there's a big part of the club, and obviously Celtic and stuff like that as well, I think we've always been a bit like that, who don't really give a shit about what religion you are.
Honestly,
but it's what. So I don't know.
Gary, just when you, I don't want to go off on a tangent. Just when you say about Celtic didn't give a shit about what religion you were, the BBC documentary about the Lions.
Yes.
The other week.
Sorry, I was meaning more to the support. I was referring more to the support.
Right. Okay. Aye. Like, because that was an eye opener for me, because I always assumed that Celtic was like a very open club, and then when you see
I know back in the day there was a very Catholic orientated thing in the boardings and stuff like that. I knew that. I knew of that, but so what I was referring was more of the fact that Celtic fans wouldn't really give a shit if the player was Catholic, Protestant, and so on. You know what I mean?
No, that I mean, Danny McGrain, he wasn't a Catholic when he signed for Celtic. As far as I know, he was never a Catholic. Kenny Dalglish, you know, King Kenny and Jockstein and all that. I mean, but yeah, to suggest that maybe this was sort of kick-started a sort of progressive revolution, if you will, in a mentality shift is difficult to say because I was too young to understand it. Liam, I've got a question for you. You have lived in Scotland and Glasgow your entire life, and you're of an age. You've been following football. You go to mass and stuff like that. Have you ever experienced? Do you socialise, or do you come across, or do you ever have to deal with any sort of sectarian stuff in your day-to-day life, or when you're going to football matches? Because me, I never really had to. At school, I had to deal with it. I went to a non-denominational school. I didn't go to a school that had any sort of any religion at all. It was just very free and open, which kind of was a good thing for me. But I did experience sectarianism on some levels because I was called all sorts of names by people in school because I've got a mad, random, crazy Irish surname. But have you ever came across that? And I asked the same question to Gary as well. But Gary, me and you we're currently abroad. History boys abroad and that. Bogota Papi. Liam, have you come across that sort of stuff in your life, or do you have to deal with that on a regular basis?
More so, the thing that gets questioned now is, why do you believe in Catholicism? Why do you attend Mass? And then obviously in my views, I have reasons why I focus on all of this. But it seems to be that people are because they don't accept it, they don't understand it, that why should you? X, Y and Z tells me that is this, so why should you believe it? Well, that's my prerogative. If we're all the same, then the world would be a boring place. But I've never sort of experienced sort of a whole sort of bitter side of it. More just people want to know why you have your beliefs. I've never experienced, there's folk that I work with that obviously working in trades that said I can remember my uncle used to work in the shipyards and he was a draftsman, and the people in the office couldn't understand why I was a Catholic as a draftsman, because a Catholic should have been on the tools and they shouldn't be in the office, things like that. But that's going back way before I was even born. But I've never experienced it full on hatred or bitterness. And to be honest, the worst of it comes is singing songs at a game, which is irrelevant. If you get bothered by that, then you need to get a thicker skin, in my opinion. I don't know.
For me, no, not so much, if I'm being honest. Obviously grew up in an area which would be considered very, very, very Protestant or very Rangers, if you want. But there's actually quite a lot of mad Fenians up there as well. So, but no, and I think this whole, I mean, it is there. It has always been there, this thing. But I actually genuinely do think that 99% of it is fairly harmless. Again, I'm speaking from my own experience here. In these days, but obviously back in the day, it actually could have an effect on your career. It could have an effect on the type of jobs you got, which would have a big effect on your life as well. I just think obviously these things, progress happens through time. You hope anyway, and I wonder if this is a moment where certain people would see the kind of stupidity of actually disliking someone because of their religion. And if you look at it in that sense, then you know what, we're still here, Celtic's still here, Celtic are thriving. It had a short-term blip on Celtic's progress and kind of gave Rangers a bit of a shot in the arm. Right, very good, and that's football. But if you want to take it in the grander scheme of things in life, then the fact that it changes the minds of some very close-minded people, and I think it would have had to, because it would have had to rethink, well, why do I hate someone because they're Catholic when I'm sitting cheering them playing for my football team? So I think it does. In terms of my personal experience, no, I've got family members who are Rangers fans, and very, very. I've got distant family members in the orange order and stuff like that. But there's never been ill will between family members or anything like that, and you can kind of. I think as there should be a kind of mutual respect and going, right, well, that's what they believe, right, let's not talk about that with them, because that's their belief, and it's not going to change based on this, as long as they don't practice hating people for their religions. Then you've kind of just got to let people live their lives. Yeah,
quite a bit of a serious tangent here about sectarianism in Scotland, so I think we can leave it at
Liam, play one of the jingles.
Level it out, mate. Soften the blows, or a piano one. So I want to just talk about a little bit about the Twitter feedback we've had lately. We've kind of been rubbish at doing that. But Chris Henderson at the Rebel Treble said, one of my earliest memories was my dad scrunching the paper up and throwing it into the fire because he'd just signed for them. And then we had a wee bit of a back and forward, and I was like, it's a bit of a common thing. It seems blah 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 blah. And he says, yeah, I remember McCoy saying later that he was one of the best strikers in Europe at the time, talking about Johnston. And then we had a wee bit of a chat back and forward. But cheers for that, Chris. He gets in touch quite a lot. Then one of the other ones that was quite funny was Thomas Hanlon at Tommy Hanlon 81. He says, growing up my house, it was him, Soonest, Darth Vader and Thatcher, in that order of villainy. So it's pretty funny in my opinion. Robert Kennedy at Boy for Life with the H said, when my boy was born 31 years ago, I left the house to go and register the birth. Idea was to call my boy Robert Morris Kennedy. Last minute change. Imagine that. He says, my boy is so grateful for the change of heart. And then King Snake at Preston McMurray, who's quite a regular guy who gets in, like, kind of follows us and like keeps in touch and stuff like that, which is cool. He says, any personal memories before it all went wrong, none that can be stated in a family forum. So there's quite a lot of disdain, and so I'm being quite nice when I say there's disdain for that guy, and he will never ever be able to set foot in Celtic Park again. So this was one of the off the back of the
make no bones about it. Like, it affected a lot of Celtic fans. It was probably the biggest scunning that you could have, in the fact that he was this player coming back. And he was, I mean, as McCoy said, he was a striker of international pedigree. He was a very good player, and the fact that not only the disappointment of losing out on him, but then to have him do that, and in such a public way, without a shadow of a doubt, it's a complete kick in the arse, and it's a humiliation to. I mean, you can imagine as a kid going into school and stuff like that, we're going to sign Mo Johnson, and then a Rangers supporting pal would just be like, it would just be or going out to work and stuff like that. You'd just be getting it. You'd be getting it tight, and yeah, it's just I don't think there's a player out there that's as universally hated by the Celtic supporters as this man.
The original troll. So I think that'll do for Judas Le Petit Merde, and yeah, don't ever consider coming back to Celtic Park, because Liam will knock you out. Liam does taekwondo, or what is it you do, Liam? Kickboxing or something? Muay Thai, mate. Make sure you're just there with a couple of guys to dish it out if he rocks up. But so yeah, that's that. So basically, obviously, this is the end of the season. Celtic won the treble last Saturday. Was one of the greatest days of all time. We've just read on Twitter that Paddy Roberts might be staying at Celtic. It's Sunday evening on the 4th of June, so he may stay, he may not stay, but that's fine. We're not going to stop just because it's the summer lockdown. It's not like that. Our podcasts are entirely history based, so we just continue as normal, the same sort of output. We're hoping to do some more Know Your History podcasts. Gary's going to be trying to get a hold of some people. The next podcast that we're going to do is on John Glass, one of the earliest guys involved with Celtic, who's extremely important in creating the club and, you know, establishing Celtic as an early force in Scottish football. I think the one after that we spoke about was Bertie Peacock, which he played for Celtic for quite a long time, so we're going to need to talk about how we're going to condense a career that spanned maybe over 10 years, I think, into what could be a 2-hour podcast. We try not to make the podcast any longer than 2 hours, because we understand that it's difficult for people to listen to them. But if you want to give us feedback on things like that, then please do. We are on Twitter at Boys Abroad, I think, or is it at, I can't even remember the Twitter handle. Hold on, I'll check. Hod the Bus. Yeah, it's at Boys Abroad, and the Gmail is it's historybhoys at Gmail. If you want to get in touch with us, some people have actually got in touch with us to ask questions about living abroad, or, you know, helping out with, like, Gary's in Colombia. If you have any questions about Colombia, if you want to meet any Colombian women, listen to Marvin Gaye, something like that, I'm not entirely sure. You can get in touch with us. But so if you fancy getting in touch with us about anything, whether that's living abroad, talking about Celtic, any suggestions, please contact us and we will respond. We are quite friendly. But thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us again, boys, tonight. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, that's the Boys Abroad, and we'll see you next time. Cheers. Hail, hail. Marvin Gaye.